Hi guys, we're going to talk about the rule of tens today, and the rule of tens is a way to think about place value and a way to help you think about multiplying so that it's quicker, and once you understand why it's quicker and the place value part in it, it will make going into place value after the decimal much easier for you in 6th grade when you do it. So go ahead and write down this little chart, and if you need to pause me, you can pause me. And we're going to talk about what it means when you multiply by tens, hundreds, and thousands. We're going to start off with the number 7, and we know that 7 is in the ones place. There are 7 ones. And if I multiply 7 times 10, it means that I have 7 tens. I'm going to write it over here. 7 tens. 7 groups of 10 numbers. And that's the same as saying 7 tens. 7 moves to the tens place. I have to have a 0 here. 7 ones times 10 means 7 tens. 7 is now in the tens place, which is 70. Let's say I have 12. Put a line here. Now 12 is different because I have a 2 in the ones place and a 1 in the ones place, and I'm going to multiply 12 times 10. That makes 12 tens. 12 tens. So my 12 moves to the 10 spot. And I have to have a placeholder in my 1. That means my number, 12 times 10, is 120. Sometimes when this rule is taught, the quick way to say it is, 7 times 10, you just add a 0 to the end and get 70. Well, that's fine and good, and it's not a lie, but sometimes it's hard to remember why you're doing that. And when we think about pre-algebra and algebra, I've said before that we're trying not to think in terms of adding and subtracting anymore, and think about relationships with of numbers between multiplying and dividing. And so when I say I'm going to add a 10 to the 7 to make 70, it doesn't really make sense why we do that. We add the 0 because we now have 7 tens. We have 7 groups of 10. And that 7 tens is the same as 70. So we have to think about that place value. It's going to be the same if we have a number like 420, and the 420 has to be in the correct place. And if I take that 420 and I multiply it by 10, it means that I have 420 tens, and I got to move one more up on my place value chart. Over here, I don't have it, so I'm gonna cut this. Here's my hundreds place. Here's my thousands. It's got to move up one. So I'm going to have 420. Remember, it ends in that tens place. And I got to add that extra placeholder 1 when we write it. 420 tens. If you hear what you're saying, you know that tens ends in the tens place. Just like here, 12 tens, it's in my chart. But I also have to account for that ones place. And that ones place is an extra 10. Let's think about it in terms of pattern. If I have 42 times 6, that's the same as saying 4 tens times 6 ones plus 2 ones times 6. 4 tens is the 40 out of here. 2 is the ones place, and both of those are being multiplied by 6. 4 tens times 6 means 40 times 6 plus 2 times 6. I've got 6 groups of 40 plus 6 times 2. When I add those together, I get 252. So just a different way to look at math. If I'm trying to break a larger number apart, like 62 times 40, 62 times 40 is the same as 62 times 4 times 10, because 4 times 10 is 40. So it's a little bit easier to multiply 64 times 4. You're breaking the numbers down. So 62 times 4 is 60 times 4 plus 2 times 4. 60 groups of 4 is 240 plus, this plus sign should be here, plus 2 times 4, which is 8, which is 248. And I have to remember that I still have that 10 that I got to multiply by. And again, I'm just moving it one place higher. That might have been a little bit confusing. You might want to go back and rewatch that if you didn't understand it the first time. But it's just a different way of taking numbers to multiply them and breaking it down. Okay, we broke down prime numbers. We're just breaking down other numbers. And those other numbers happen to be tens. And thinking about the tens place and the hundreds place and the thousands place. And 8,000s, no, that's an easy one. 14,000s, 14 times 1,000 is the same as saying 14 thousands. I know that I write it 14,000. It's much easier to say it in words. Let's talk about dividing. I need a new paper. I'm out of room. Let's divide by tens, hundreds, and thousands. 70 divided by 10 is, how many tens do I have here? Think about our chart. I have 7 tens. 7 tens is the same as saying 70. 7 tens divided by 10. Here's my place. I have tens here, tens here. Those tens kind of like cancel each other out. I know that 70 divided by 10 makes 7 groups of 10. I have 160 divided by 10. 160 is still saying what? How many tens? How many tens is 160? 16 tens. 16 tens. Look at my tens place. Ones, tens, hundreds. Ones, tens. 7 tens, 16 tens. Divided by 10, 16. If I have 1,800 divided by 10, how many tens do I have here? Well, I look at where the tens place ends. Ones, tens. Wherever that ends is how many tens I have. I have 180 tens. If I'm taking that 180 tens and I'm putting it into groups of 10, how many do I have? 180. They're the same thing. 1,800 is the same as 180 tens. I'm looking at that place value. So let's look at this chart again. Hundreds, tens, ones. If I have 45 tens, how much do I have? Well, I got to put that 45 where it ends in the tens place. I have to have a number here in my ones place. 45 tens is the same as 450. I'm going to take that 45 tens and divide it by 10. .45 tens divided by 10 is like saying 45 divided by 1. I have 45 groups. 45 groups of 10. What if it's different? What if I'm not dividing by 10? What if I'm dividing by 100? So I'm going to add a column here. Let's say my new problem is let's take this 180 tens that we did up here and let's put it in our chart. That way you can see it in the chart. 180 tens means that I'm putting 180 and I'm ending it in my tens place, but 180 tens is actually 1,800. So I have 180 tens. Now I'm going to divide it by, instead of 10, I'm going to divide it by 100. 180 tens divided by 100. Well, how many hundreds do I have in this number? If I have 180 tens, how many hundreds are in this number? So I look at my hundreds place. 180 tens is the same as 18 hundreds. $180 tens is the same as 18 hundreds. $1,800 is the same as 180 tens or 18 hundreds. So if I want to divide 180 tens by 100, I'm going to call it 18 hundreds. Now I'm moving my group into hundreds. How many groups will I have? 18. Because I'm dividing them by a larger number. 18 hundreds divided by 100 in the hundreds place is like 18 divided by 1. 18 groups. Place value is kind of tricky, but the more you understand about place value, the easier it's going to be for you to understand decimals and fractions and the other side of the decimal, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And if you understand this chart and why when we divide by 10 or multiply by 10, we move the decimal or we move the zeros around, and we move them around because we can, because we're thinking in terms of tens, hundreds, thousands, it'll make it much easier for you. And it's really hard to explain here just by doing your notes, but just know these little things or these little tricks. They're not really tricks, they're the rules. They're the rules of 10 and why we can do that. You are going to be working on multiplying and dividing numbers in tens, hundreds, and thousands. So I hope this helped you a little bit. We will meet again, and we're going to talk about exponents or powers of 10 in our next notes.